So I'll start at 10 on the nose. We can see some folks are there. Hello, everyone. People are filing in. Wow, here they come. This is exciting. Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for attending. We're going to start in just a minute. I want to get the proper name. Okay, I'm going to get started. Hi, I'm Jonathan Fishman, and I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of LeanLaw. And I have together here today two wonderful, both LeanLaw clients and partners and good friends. So Karyn Andersen from Total Sum. She's an accounting professional based out of Houston, Texas. An amazing person to handle back office, a great partner to LeanLaw, and many times has partnered with me directly, as with Suzy Fulton, to help clients move from where they were to where they want to go. And I have Suzy Fulton from Fulton Yang. She's one of the founding partners of I'll let her describe the law firm. So just to start, Karyn and Suzy, I'd like you to introduce yourselves and just let the audience know a little bit about your respective practices and roles.
Let Karyn go first.
Hi, I'm Karyn, owner, founder, Total Sum LLC. We specialize in legal and trust accounting, with a big emphasis on being a back office, full back accounting office for mid-sized firms.
And I'm Suzy Fulton. Let you
sorry,
go.
Suzy. Karyn, how do you
No, no
define
problem.
Karyn, how do you define mid-size?
Anywhere from 15 to 30 attorneys.
Perfect. Suzy, go ahead.
Okay. So Suzy Fulton, I'm one of the co-founders of Fulton Yang with Wei Zhang. And we have a women-owned full service across business and commercial lines law firm. We currently have 30 attorneys, so we're pushing the end of Karyn's mid-sized firm definition, but we've been blowing and going for almost 2 years now.
Yeah. Well, and Suzy, your firm is unique in it's 30 attorneys, and correct me if I'm wrong, like one support staff or something very low.
Oh, we're well, so Karyn and her group serves as our back office accounting and kind of controller function, and then we have outsourced a few outsourced paralegals, and we really only have one person who is non-attorney on staff, and she's a technical advisor. And everyone else we have in admin that we can use for certain functions. But we run much like the name LeanLaw. Our firm runs very lean as far as on support staff.
Yeah, that's what my comment. A 30-person law firm and another architecture might be 60 to 70 people, and yours is 30 people. So let's set the table a little. As I mentioned, I'm Jonathan from LeanLaw. I want to just let everyone know what LeanLaw is. We are a financial workflow tool targeted to small to mid-sized law firms. We handle the full financial life cycle of how law firms onboard, track time and fees, draft, deliver, and collect on their invoicing architecture. And we handle all the derivative reporting. So folks come to us because they want a financially focused, upmarket, reporting-centric financial workflow. We also work with non-workflow tools like NetDocuments to handle the practice management side. And of course, we follow what we call a best-in-class mindset. So we think that LeanLaw is an awesome tool for your financial workflows, and QuickBooks is an amazing tool for the back office team. And it enables an architecture like Suzy and Karyn have, where the lawyers are lawyering and working in LeanLaw every day, and the back office is using one of the preeminent cloud accounting tools, QuickBooks. So today, for the audience, we want this to be as interactive as possible. We're in the chat. I have my colleague, Molly McConnell, who is monitoring the chat. We want you to ask your questions, to be part of the conversation. So please interact with us. And I'm going to start with a question, which is how many, I want two questions actually. What would you like to learn today? And number two, are you currently in some form or fashion having compensation tracking within your firm? So if you could just drop those in the chat and Molly will help surface those. So I wanted to start, Suzy, you have such an important origin story of going all the way back to where we met when you were at a firm called Grable Martin Fulton. And I wanted to set the table by starting with that story because I think people believe compensation tracking is a thing or a function. It's a worksheet. It's something that you look at it once a month. And what I learned when we first interacted, as we started to engage, that it's much more. It's more of a tenet into how you operate your law firm. So please, let's go back to the beginning.
Okay, so as Jonathan said, we started Grable Martin Fulton back in 2013, and it's the same model that we have today, and basically using many of the same cloud-based platforms that we have today with Fulton Yang. And it was started by Lee Grable, Shauna Martin, and myself, and all of us had been former in-house general counsels with tech companies. And we realized, and this was 2013, very pre-pandemic, that we never went to our outside counsel's offices. And so based on that, we felt that we could be successful having a virtual law firm with no offices and running very lean on staffing and whatnot. And so started off with that model. And then we ended up with our compensation, and how we did it was always transparent, but it was difficult to track. Originally, we were doing it just on a spreadsheet, and it was getting, as we got more and more lawyers, more and more clients, it was getting to the point where it became untenable to just do it on a spreadsheet. And we were using a different billing and invoicing system at the time, but it was still very much hand driven. We couldn't get things automated, and that was really cramping and slowing down any growth that we were looking at. So to that end, we started looking into different systems, and Jonathan with LeanLaw, they came highly recommended from an IT professional that he's been a CTO with many tech companies, and he talked to different vendors for us, and he felt like Jonathan's group was going to be in a position to help us out. And because one of the things, when we started with them from day one, we told LeanLaw at this time, you don't have the tools or the ability to track our compensation and help us with our distribution spreadsheet in a way that's automated, but can you help us do that? And they were willing, and subsequently able followed through with that, where we tried before with our prior vendor and they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't get it automated, and LeanLaw did. So they got us to a point where we're not cranking numbers on a spreadsheet and making all these manual entries, and along with that, human error plays a large part. And so now we're in a position today where we're pretty automated with that. And I can let Karyn can speak. She deals with that on a daily basis with our firm, so I'll let her speak. to
Well,
that, I think.
hold on one second, Susie, because you kind of went into a different area, but I want to go back to when you and your two other partners were first of all, like what a bold move to go virtual that early, right? I mean, it was just not as easy as you think it is today post-pandemic. But when you thought about setting up a firm and you were coming out of the larger firm, and I know that with some of the bureaucracy that you wanted to get rid of, you guys wanted to stream it down. You didn't want the overhead, both in, again, bureaucracy, but also in cost. So you create Grable Martin in this virtualized way. And as you thought about recruiting attorneys, did you modify your comp tracking from what you had and saw some faults with the bigger firm, or was it the basics, was it the same model that you had in the larger firm? And how was that decision around comp tracking part of the foundation of the firm? Because as you recruited folks, you needed people to be like-minded, to be incented. There had to be transparent. I mean, you're talking about the mechanics of managing it, which we'll get to, but I want to talk about the business decision about how it was integrated in the business model of Grable Martin Fulton when that was formed.
So I was in a little different position than Lee and Shauna was at the time, because they were coming from a firm that was a smaller firm. They were getting to the point where they had been somewhat virtual. They had offices, but part of the group wanted to become a traditional law firm with offices and staff and everything. And Lee and Shauna weren't really big on that idea. And so they both of them knew me, and so they recruited me. I was coming off of an in-house stint, and so I wasn't, coming from the comp model that they had, but that was definitely part of what we talked about. One of our first conversations, was having a comp structure that was very transparent and easy, to where, because I think all of us had been with big firms at some point, and all of us had been with smaller firms or boutiques as well, and we all realized that that was a big part of the dissension that occurred in law firms, is the compensation and who gets what and how the pie is split, and could lead to a lot of just infighting, I guess, amongst
Absolutely.
the partners and the attorneys, and you get disgruntled. It's like, oh, they're getting more than I am, and they're not doing as much or whatever, and so we created from day one what we thought was an easy compensation structure with percentages. This percentage goes to the firm, this percentage goes to the originator, this percentage goes to the worker bee. And it didn't matter whether, this partner was bringing in a lot more than the other. It was just, here's your numbers. And the people that we recruited and got to join us were very receptive to that, I think, and I think they appreciate the fact that they know what their paycheck looks like, and what they have to do to get that paycheck, right?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, which was I wanted to ask the question, and Karyn, I'm going to loop you in just a second. The philosophy of the firm it wasn't entirely what you kill, but it gave the incentive of the attorneys that if they originated and did the work, they saw the fair share of what they would take home, and it was transparent from beginning to end. And
Right.
LeanLaw, of course, gave you real-time visibility to that and automated a lot of it, but it was the philosophy of the firm. And I guess what I'm asking is, was that part of like the early discussions in recruiting attorneys into Grable Martin Fulton, and still today with Fulton Yang?
Oh, for sure. I mean, because I think that's a big attraction of our firm today, and the firm before was because of our structure and our low overhead. We give a very, very large percentage, and I don't know of any other firm, that gives as big a percentage to where the firm, I guess the better way to phrase it is where the firm takes such a small percentage, right? There's just not another firm that I know of that does it the way that we do, and we're able to do that because our overhead is low. And so our attorneys are, if they're originating and working it, they keep a very large percentage of that. And I think, that's something that's attractive to a lot of lawyers.
Yeah, and I'm going to take 1 second before, Karyn, I'm going to loop and ask a question to you and set the table with the group so we're all understanding what we're talking about in some of the words, as some of us may be more advanced on these subjects. So in the 1950s, there was a Boston-based firm called Hale and Dorr, and it became sort of the foundation of the modern way in the structure of how we handle compensation tracking. And there's really three major tenets: who originated the work, who's responsible for the work, and who's the worker bee, who's the finder, minder, grinder, right? So those are the three tenets, and it's all based on collected revenue. So typically, if you originate the work, you get a certain percentage of that on the total, and then what's left over. So if you originate $100, you get the first 10 if it's 10% origination. Maybe some goes to the house or to the firm, and then based on working, you allocate those down. And that's where it gets really messy. And that's what Karyn's going to talk about in a second. Like Suzy mentioned, manual spreadsheets. So I actually wanted to show really quickly, because we keep talking about your firm. So this is LeanLaw's back end facet of our compensation tracking. And the reason I show you this is because compensation tracking isn't just a report. It's the rules that set up how we go about compensation tracking, how they're applied to client matters and individuals. There's the reporting, and then there's the distribution. So it's really a full workflow. But I wanted to bring this in because this was a piece we actually built. When Suzy says, hey, I came to LeanLaw and there was a piece that was unique, they have something called a referral. But this allows us, for certain people to have maybe a different origination share because, hey, Harvey Specter gets it's just a different negotiated rate. And that's where it happens at the firm level. We set up that revenue allocation, and then we can do it at the individual level. And then we can also go into a specific matter and look at billing and rates.
Billing rates.
Who did the origination here, and we can split it amongst different users. I don't have it split here, but this is where we define responsible and have that working percentage. So I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that with that the back end flexibility and modernizing the orchestrating this is really an important part of getting the agenda out and making it visible. And that's what you keep saying is the transparency was an important piece. Karyn, getting back to your world. So you come into Fulton and have to adopt it. Tell me, like, when you come into a law firm and you're being introduced to their compensation, what do you look for? Like, what are the things that are important to you thinking of the operations of it? You said coming in this meeting, the one thing you wanted to say in this group to learn is that don't overcomplicate it. And I can think of another firm not here, and I think about that last 10%, and I'm like, my goodness, that is not valuable to anyone to make it so complicated. So help this group understand, as someone who works with law firms of this size, what your process is as you approach a firm, and both the opportunities and the challenges you have in helping someone like Suzy facilitate this important part of their operational activity.
It was pretty easy with Fulton because when I first met Suzy, and she mentioned that they use strictly compensation distribution system, no salaries. Of course, my first reaction was I kind of cringed because I've seen it time and time again where law firms will have overly complicated compensation structures, which are nearly impossible to track in any software. It always requires spreadsheets and manual calculations. I've seen them where they'll do a hybrid of billing versus collected, and then it makes it even more complicated.
Oh my gosh.
And, as an example, I had a small firm of 6 attorneys, and I would spend probably 5 days doing their compensation tracking. Whereas with Suzy's firm, I can do it in less than 2 days with 30 attorneys because they have such a good system in place.
So hold on. So let's really drill down on that, because we said the first key lesson, what I heard from Suzy, was transparency. Like if you make this thing transparent, it takes a lot of downstream headaches away. And it sets the table that, hey, if you've got certain attorneys that are high producers, they're going to make what they're going to make. And if the certain persons are sort of like, here's, I'm good and I'm good with this, that's what they make. What I'm hearing you say is keep it simple, right? Keep it simple.
Yes.
So let's talk about like what that really means. Because you just said, hey, let's not mix billed versus collected. So could you get into what keep it simple means?
It's just that it's an easy to track metric that everybody has the ability to see and view at any time. And build that out in a way that it's the system is automating that for you. You know, I don't have to deal with attorneys coming to me on a daily or weekly basis saying, hey, can you tell me how much revenue I've earned this month, or how much, you know, have I collected this, have I collected that, and you know, kind of where do I sit? Any attorney within the firm can log in, pull the compensation report, and see. And I think it also helps on the collection side as well. You know, let's say the worker bee is curious, am I going to get paid on this work I did for another attorney? He can pull that, and it's very transparent to everyone. He can pull that because it's an easy automated report in LeanLaw, and he can say, oh, well, I haven't been paid. So now I'm going to, you know, the client hasn't paid. So now I'm going to go hit the responsible attorney and say, hey, can you push on the client to get this paid so I can get paid? You
Yeah.
know, so
Well, one of the things, just to build off of that, one of the things that we found valuable, we built it for another firm, but was just distribution. So we have a tool in LeanLaw that allows you to take paid invoice, collate those into a distribution, whether it's monthly, quarterly, every is, push it over to QuickBooks, you write your checks. But when you go into LeanLaw, you can view by time or you can view by disbursements. And of course, the check matches the disbursement. But when we get back to when we say make it simple, some of the things that I've heard that make it complicated is number one, what you said is commingling billed versus collected. Like, just don't do that. Pick one, right? And LeanLaw always goes by collected because 99% of all firms base their reporting on collected. Number two, where I find the most agita is talking about, well, if I originate and I'm responsible, or if I originate someone else's work and they start getting into this one, 2/10 versus 8/10. And what I find is that when you run those numbers at the end, it really all washes itself out. So they're not trying to just get split. I mean, split origination is super easy at LeanLaw, right? 5 to Suzy, 5 to Karyn, done. We split it 5. You guys each get 5 cents up the other. It's when they start to take fractions of working and they that bottom. So have you seen that, Karyn, where you see people get overly detailed in the referral back and forth? I may not be explaining it well, or maybe Susan,
no, no,
you've seen
you're
in other
absolutely.
firms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've seen it where they'll use different structures, and you know, there'll be a different structure between different attorneys within the same firm. And if you take those numbers, let's say we run the numbers for one attorney on 1 month or a quarter basis, and then I go and I pull a different method, saying, okay, I'm going to use the same method for everybody, and then I run those numbers. It's very much like you said, the end result is almost within dollars of each other. So you're overcomplicating it. So where the attorney has no idea how much they've earned in compensation, you're overcomplicating because you're paying your accounting department 3 times as much, giving them 3 times as much work to come to basically the same number.
Yeah, so that's the second thing. So what we heard, one, pick a tool and automate it, right? 2, keep it simple. 3, keep it transparent. Suzy, what's the flip of that? What I mean by that is, let's say it's not automated and there's doing work. What's the tension you see from other attorneys when they fetch about bad compensation? Like, you're the managing partner, right? You had to deal with 30, 40 attorneys or whatever it is, and you had it prior to LeanLaw. What was the agita that you had to deal with in managing underperforming comps tracking systems?
Well, that was like Karyn said, we were constantly getting questions because the attorney, everyone wants to know, because we're not paying based on paychecks, right? And so it's based on what's been collected. And everybody deserves to know, hey, we pay once a month, what is my paycheck going to be? What is it going to look like? Right. And that's a fair question. When we didn't have it automated, it was a bigger, pain point because we might not know, or it would take us going to our accounting team and saying, oh, John Doe wants to know what they're making next month, based on where we are, it's the 23rd of the month, and what does it look like? And that would require them getting off track, oh, blah, 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 do the calculations and come back to us. And so there wasn't the ability for the attorneys to know on a daily basis. I mean, for us, it's basically once you can go in once a day or at any time during the day and know generally what you're going to make next month, what your paycheck's going to be. And we didn't have that, so there was just a lot of people having to do other things than what they're getting paid to do.
Did you ever have tension of attorneys leaving because of
Not
because
not because of that, but it was, you could tell there was frustration, and rightfully so. I mean, because like everybody deserves to know what they're getting paid. So there was
right.
frustration, and obviously, if that frustration goes on too long, people are going to leave. And fortunately, we didn't have that happen. But it could easily, happen if that frustration builds to the point of like, this is just ridiculous. I'm going to find
And
something else.
have either of you noticed? So we're in this major shift right now in the broader legal world. Boomers are aging out. We're seeing that happen on a daily basis. They're ceding control to Gen Y, Gen X's, right? And then you've got these millennials that are now becoming the big earners for the firm. This is a question to both of you. Have you seen that transition put more pressure on the tech, on the data transparency, on the automation, like we have?
So if I get what you're asking, I mean, I think the ease of use of the system is critical, particularly for the people who are in the Gen X boomer generations, especially, where some of us or all, we didn't grow up with the emails and all the tech that we have available. And some people have adapted and are more technically savvy than others in that generation. And so I think one of the things is that the tech has to be easy to use. And you definitely have that where anybody in the Gen Z group, millennial groups, it's just something they grew up with. And so there's really they're not fighting with it as much. And so I guess there's that, I've seen that generational where it's easier for some groups or generations to adapt to the tech. And so that's where it's critical for the tech to be basically idiot simple, right?
So, Karyn, I'm kind of curious of your perspective. So you've got new clients coming to you, and maybe they don't have, and I'm not saying give LeanLaw an attaboy here, because Clio's a good tool. There's other good tools in the marketplace. But when you come in, how do you address both the challenges of a comp scheme, right? We talked about keeping it simple. And then we talked about the accounting architecture. It's got to be supported all the way back to the balance sheet and to the, to how we're dealing with partners and partner structures. It goes all the way back in the accounting architecture. And then also the tracking. So when you come into a firm and you get recruited, you want the business, but at the same time, you don't want bad business. So what's that been like over the last, let's just say 5-7 years? Right, because I mean that's the truth. I mean you've made some very key strategic changes in your practice over the last 5 years, and you now have the ability to say no to a client. But there are a lot of good opportunities, and I'm just sort of curious as you approach a firm, and this is for the group because you want someone like Karyn in your back office, whether she owns the entire back office or she's helping to enable your existing back office, because she makes your law firm better day in and day out. So my question Karyn, is when you get approached and LeanLaw hands you a new client, and maybe it's, I mean, I guess we're okay because you like our comp tracking, but let's just say it's some other client. What's your approach to that? Because it plays into like the philosophy of that law firm. Are they willing to, keep it simple, be transparent, use
Yeah.
good tech?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the first thing, when I meet with a potential client, the first thing we do is we take a look at how are you doing things now and what is your goal? Where are you trying to go? Where are you trying to go with this? And as we learn what their goals are, then at that point, we have the expertise to be able to make recommendations on, you should be using A, B, and C, and you should be doing it, X, Y, Z. And when I encounter a firm that just says, no, we've never done it that way, we're not going to consider it, we're going to stick with our old school, that tells me that's someone who's just not willing to pivot and do what is necessary to ensure, the best outcome for their firm.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point, which is firms have to be willing to evolve. And we just had a client leave LeanLaw. They came from a really old, antiquated environment, and there were two truisms that we learned that we should have probably never taken them as a client. One was that they didn't value a good accounting back office tool like QuickBooks. They didn't value a balance sheet, P&L, and statement of cash flows because they're a private company, few people own them, and they're like, it's okay as long as it's pretty right. And the second was they wanted to just never evolve. They wanted everything to be exactly as it was. And like, we're not that. I want to get to a question that Jonathan's raising in the chat. I'm going to read it, Jonathan, to make sure that I understand it. And he writes, subscription legal services have been around for a while. It's reaching the business community and legal community serving businesses. What are your thoughts about how to manage the firm, the originating attorney, and the working attorney appointment of fees paid when there is a fixed monthly fee to the client and different attorneys are dipping into the work on tasks included? So what I'm hearing you say, Jonathan, if I have it right and checks me back, is, hey, we're evolving into value-based pricing, fixed rate pricing. We see it all the time. And now we're saying, how does this handle and door, which is not the hourly billing model, how do we evolve the compensation tracking to meet both the individual needs of the attorneys who want to earn compensation, the firm's needs for overhead and profitability, and then still get back to the client? Jonathan, can you give me a yes or no if I got that right in restating that question? I think it's a great question. So Suzy, do you have some thoughts on that? I'm not sure if you guys are approaching that.
Absolutely, because I mean, I've done that personally with a couple of my clients where I had them on a fixed monthly fee. And what I did was, and because it was fixed monthly, for me, it was at an effective billing rate that was lower than my standard one, right? And I would use other attorneys to help me out. One, our employment attorney brought her in a lot. I brought another technology attorney in to work a lot of the vendor side deals. And what I had them do was just, okay, can you agree to do it at this lower effective hourly rate because we're getting paid monthly and it's more of a guarantee. Both attorneys, and actually all of the attorneys that work with this client, were more than happy to do that. So we just tracked it like we do everything in LeanLaw, where they would enter the hours that they spent on that client, and then just set that hourly rate in LeanLaw. So at the end of the month, it was just telling the accounting team, hey, they would just split it out where it was already accounted for. So, I mean, so you can do that by, and there's probably other ways to do that, but it was just taking that flat fee, and the way we divided it up was basically just based on the hours that were worked. So.
Yeah, I want to show a few things, just to visualize what we're talking about. So one of the things that we just talked about is is setting that originator. So as I said, we can set the originator if there's more than one. If there is a fixed fee, one of the features that LeanLaw has is a revenue allocation. So that's one way, Jonathan, that you can set up some standard revenue allocation based on either percentage or hours put into it, and that can allocate it out down in a fully automated way. So that's one tactic if we know that's a fee. And the hours, whenever you in LeanLaw track hours, you can, if it's a flat rate matter, we're still tracking those hours against it. And I will tell you, and I will tell you from about 4,000 conversations with law firms, you are foolish if you're not tracking time, even if you're a full contingent practice. There is nothing more accurate in understanding what goes into a matter than time. There's nothing more from a cost perspective and productivity perspective. So even our contingent firms in LeanLaw track time. Then there's other reports in LeanLaw where you might look at, fixed fee profitability, where you'll actually see the value, our value based on the hours that were put into the system. So it's another report where you can come in and get at that data. And it kind of leads me to where I want to go. Jonathan, did we get at, he's got a follow-up. Love this, and I don't mind slowing us down to talk about it. Some lawyers are very efficient. Others take more time on the same task, or I could misestimate in assigning people. If you have a combination of these factors, someone's going to feel unhappy. So what he's getting at is, and this is a good question, how do you accommodate, different cadences, different the real world? Okay, I'm looking at an invoice and I got 10 hours and I know that Jerry did this work in 6 hours and the client's not going to pay for it. I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but there's a write down opportunity there that's going to lose some compensation potentially out of your pocket. How do you managing those moments to certain people take longer to task, the inverse is, like, I have attorneys that had their time because they know they're so darn efficient and the market rate at that task is X. They can do it in 60% of the time. So they're not doing a fixed fee. They're sort of, honestly, they're padding their time a little bit to get to the market value. So how are you dealing with those moments?
So, again, our firm operates on the premise that our attorneys know their clients better than we do, right? So I don't have a relationship with other attorneys' clients for the most part, right? So the firm doesn't tell them to flat fee bill. The firm doesn't tell them what rate to bill them at. We don't have a minimum billable. We don't get involved in that. So the attorneys are completely free to determine the best way to get paid from that client. And so in this situation, it's really going to be incumbent on the originating partner to determine the best way to handle that type of situation, where if they have to write the time down of another attorney because they feel like that attorney was being inefficient, then it's going to be incumbent upon them to go to that attorney and say, hey, look, I think blah, 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 we're only getting this flat fee. You took up way more than anticipated of the monthly amount. So we're going to have to write it down this much, whatever, so that attorney needs to manage it. If that originating attorney needs or wants to bring me or way into that conversation, happy, not happy, but we'll definitely get involved. But for the most part, it's like, our attorneys are the ones that know the client. Can they go back to the client and say, hey, this really took a lot longer than anticipated. Can we charge a little more this month? Because maybe that's fair. So there's different ways of handling it. We basically will say, originating attorney, you take the reins and handle it. If you need the firm to get involved, we will.
Yeah, I think it can be very insightful. What I've seen people go back and write down reports in LeanLaw and looking at what was not collected, realization. And there's two insights. One is you may have underestimated the work and there's a conversation with the client, as you said. But a lot of times, I've seen that attorneys are in the wrong role. Like the worker bees are in the wrong role for the task that they're being asked to do. And unless you really look holistically at some of the productivity data, and LeanLaw has these productivity reports, and saying, wow, this person is way more productive doing this type of work versus that. And it may not be that they're a bad worker, they're just in the wrong spot and manage it. The last thing I think, well, Jonathan wrote something else, but he said he's looking for a simple algorithm. Jonathan, my comment back is there isn't a perfect solution to get what you want. But I will tell you that as LeanLaw begins to bring AI into our product, which we'll start to see later this year, you'll start to have tools that can look across lots of data sets and ask questions in a natural language way that may give you insights back that a report just can't give you. And so that's, I think, going to address that. The last thing, I'm just reading this first time. Yeah, he says he accepts the responsibility to manage this, as Suzy phrased it. He doesn't want to involve the founders. Anyways, let's move on. So I want to take some time and get back to the culture piece of this. And Karyn, I'm going to start with you. So you come into a firm and you said, keep it simple. Then you said you have to have a willingness and receptivity for change. You're driving away from, manual work to automation. So how do you in your work from coming into a firm start to get wins in building the confidence and trust of the attorneys? Like, what are you doing in the back office? How many cycles does it go through? Is it different reporting? Is it meeting with individual attorneys and not just the managing partners? How is your work moving beyond to take this comp tracking from something that's a report and maybe black boxed and maybe manual and seen as a pain point to bringing it now to an asset of the firm? Do you see that in your work that your, attorneys are calling you now and you're like, wow, you have the answer, or you can send them a report? What's that life cycle like as you're onboarding new firms and moving them? And how do you see that change?
To be honest, I see a lot more resistance than I do willingness to change. When I see an overly complicated structure and I approach them about simplifying it, I just find more times than not they're not willing to deviate, and they're not willing to take a look at any of our options.
Why do you think that is? This is the
Oh.
heart and soul that drives me nuts with law firms. And I'm going to ask both of you that question, but I'm going to start with you, Karyn. Why do you think that is?
I think in their mind, they're thinking, don't try to fix what's not broken, because in their mind it's not broken. But when we take a look at it, we realize that it is broken. That's a lot of the issue. I think they have to understand that the system is broken. I mean, if the system was working and working effectively, you wouldn't be coming to me.
So what are symptoms of broken to you? I know I didn't prep her for this. I didn't prep her for this question, so I'm doing it on the spot.
Well, the first thing is when I take a look at their books, and I see a lot of missteps and issues, that tells me something is broken somewhere.
Okay, so I'm going to stop and say, I want the group to understand this. So Karyn takes a forensic accounting mindset and she goes into the chart of accounts. That's where the assets are, the liabilities are, the profit, all the things in the books. And what she's looking for is saying she's looking for oddities. Because what happens in poorly run back offices is that the back office team will do journal entries and do all these little things to make things look right. Or correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm characterizing, it's not like they're trying to be illegal in misrepresenting the books, but there's this magic thing called a journal entry in accounting that can make anything turn correct, right? It's the magic wand of the accounting professional. And so when she goes into the back office and looks at the chart of accounts and sees a lot of journal entries, that might be symptomatic that they're band-aiding a core problem. Did I represent that correctly?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the first thing. You look at the accounting. Then what?
Then we have a discussion about where we see issues and where we see they can make some improvements.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop here. And from a business perspective, and again, I've had over 4,000 conversations with law firms. There's this idea that they tolerate mediocrity and work practices. And they sort of just push it off to the back office, to the secretarial staff, to all these other people. And what that means is they're spending money to do manual work in an inefficient way. And that is symptomatic of the entire industry. I see it over and over, both in financial workflows and non-financial workflows. And they think because they're so cash flow driven, I'm making a lot of cash, that they're running good businesses, and they aren't. That's just my personal perspective. I want to go and ask Suzy your question on why do you think law firms are so darn resistant to change?
I know the answer to that.
Oh, gosh,
I
everyone.
think it is because most attorneys, and not all of them, but many attorneys are like cats, and they don't like change, right? And so anything where they're changing, it's hard to do. And the other thing is, as attorneys, we're taught to be risk averse, right? And we're trying to keep our clients from taking too much risk that gets them in trouble. And I think when you have that background, and this is something coming from a big law firm, that many of us are trained, to keep our clients out of trouble. And if you're there long enough, what that means is you end up with this mindset of becoming very risk averse, and whether that and that influences all of your decisions, that whether you realize it or not. And that might be jumping to another firm, a firm like ours. It may be in the advice that you're giving your clients. It may be in being reluctant to change and jump into a new technology, whether that's invoicing or billing or whatever, right? And a reluctance to embrace or even try AI. I think it's driven a lot by just there's a big reluctance in our profession, to change, and it's some of it is just driven by what we do, by the nature of what we do, and trying to keep people out of trouble.
Do you think that that changes with the younger generation relative to what tools they use?
I think so. I mean, I think the younger generation is a lot, they're a lot more fluid in what they're, because if you think about all the technology and just all of the AI tools that are out there today that weren't there a year ago, and we're just constantly being bombarded, right? You can't even keep up with this company or that company and what they're doing. And I think the younger generation, that's kind of the norm for them, where they've seen
Right.
that, where the
Wow.
technology has just changed. It changes daily, or constantly, and so they're used to that, and they're used to seeing that. They're used to accepting it and moving into or onto different platforms. They're more receptive to trying different applications or platforms, and so I think definitely there is some generational
Yeah,
influence there. So
I think there's something to be noted here, and I really want this group to hear this, which is we're talking about compensation tracking as a tenet to how you recruit, retain top talent, right? And we said keep it simple. We said automate it. But what's most important, if you're in a position of authority here on this call, is that you've got to embrace that resistance to change that Karyn talked about when she says, hey, this is overly complicated. Like you're going to pay me X dollars a month to do the last 10%, and the numbers are going to pretty much be the same if we did it straight out of the way LeanLaw does it in a fully automated way. So I guess what I'm hearing you, Suzy, is that you're saying, hey, your generation has this resistance, as does mine does. I'm 57 in this. I don't know. I don't want to get in ages, but I'm a Gen X, and these modern law firms that embrace what we call the modern tech or best in class stack need to think about technology as a tool and not just accept the status quo and be open to the idea of change. I'm not saying use AI to do lawyering. I think that's a whole different subject, but automating your comp tracking, like that's not rocket science. A question just came up. I want to get to it. This is from Joseph. I'm going to paraphrase it as best I can. He says they have a lot of cases with contingency fees that far fees that far more cover the attorney's hours at an hourly rate. And it poses this problem. You've got attorney A, who's, a good contributor, and attorney B, who may be less efficient and honest. And so he asked the question, well, how do you deal with inflationary hour reporting in this situation? It's a large case and can be abused there's a slush where maybe the less efficient attorney is billing more hours, if I get that question, against that fee. Have you seen that, Suzy or Karyn, and can comment back on it? Because I have an answer, but I'm wondering what you guys say.
I'll probably defer to you on that. So, because our firm, like I said in the beginning, we do so much business and commercial law that we do very few contingent fee cases. So there's not a lot of background for me to answer that question. I've told our lawyers that if it comes up, let's work something out that works for everybody, right? Because contingent fee with our percentages, the way it's split, it's more than likely going to be unfair to that attorney who does all of the work on it, and most likely a litigation attorney, right? That's where it's going to come up, right? So that the percentages that we have as our standard ones would probably end up being unfair, where the firm would get probably way more than it should if they hit it big, right? Or they win that case. And so what I've said is if we get into this type of deal, we're gonna talk about it, and when it comes up, we're gonna figure out what's fair to you, what's fair to the firm, and do it that way, because it's just not something that we deal with on a daily basis. And so I think I'd love to hear your response on that, unless
Well,
Karyn has dealt with that type of
Karyn, did you see it? Do you have any
payment.
comments on that? And then
Yeah, I mean, I think in scenarios like this, and especially when it's mainly a contingency firm, why would your compensation not be based on a percentage rather than hours?
well, we don't have time to get into that detail. So maybe,
Yeah.
Joseph, if you follow up, my answer is going to be a fairly generic one, but I think it's really important, which is number one is that you need a system that you can put time in and you can track and see productivity, right? So you need the automation and you need the architecture so it's very clear who's doing what, where, and when. Number two, you need a culture of transparency, right? Because what happens is it will reveal itself that this is taking X and Y. And it's becomes the managing partners to come in and say, well, why? Why is this taking? Is it, and it goes back to, are they doing something in a nefarious way, or are they doing in the wrong position, right? So I don't know exactly, Joseph, what's going on in your firm to say what that B attorney is, if less efficient / maybe dishonest. That's a whole different subject. But if you have very transparent comp tracking, and you have you have a culture where this is on the open and we talk about it, it's much easier to deal with these issues. As Suzy said, hey, we get this case in. If it's a big win, we're going to negotiate. And trust is there because you have the right culture. If you have a black box system that is manual and is not clear as what's happening, you don't have trust, which causes more tension later. And I know that's not the exact answer that Joseph is looking, but I think it's the underlying components. In the last bit here, I want to help this group. So I'm turning you two into management consultants. So we now have joined a new firm. I'm the sales guy because that's what I do. And I brought Suzy in as the attorney consultant, and I've got Karyn, and we have this new firm that's forming of, 15 attorneys that are spinning out of some boutique firms, some larger firms. I want you two to, from your different vantage points, give them the top things that they should be thinking about as they begin to set up their firm from a comp tracking. What are the most important questions that they need to answer? I'm going to start with the back office with Karyn. So Karyn, you're consulting them. They're at the table, and what are the most important questions that you want them to ask or answer right away?
Actually, I would like Suzy to answer that first.
All right, Suzy, you go.
Well, I mean, it really truly is since we spun off from the Grable Martin Fulton firm and we formed the Fulton Yang, we went through this, right? And having been with the other firm for 10 years, I kind of had an idea of the expectations of the attorneys that we brought with us and what they needed in order for it to happen. And, the big thing is people need to get paid, right? And they need to know that they're going to get paid on time and in a way where they understand what they're making. And I said this at the beginning. So that's what we're, at the end of the day, you work to get that paycheck. And there's a lot of other reasons to work, but you need to know when and how you're getting paid. So for us, it was critical that we were using LeanLaw before. We did not and couldn't have any sort of disruption because our lawyers knew that system, and we needed to make sure, okay, we're when we transition, we're keeping LeanLaw. All right. But then there's, okay, how do we know how much to pay our lawyers? From LeanLaw, we can get the numbers, but who's keeping our QuickBooks and all? Because that's not me. I mean, I don't have an accounting background. I've taken one accounting course in my life. I'm a STEM person, and I can't do that. So it was also absolutely critical that we get the back office accounting function in place. And whether you have that, for us, it's outsourced, and we use Karyn's team. But even if you're going to hire the team for the firm, I think that's a critical part of it, because, and I was talking about this before we went live, that I consider you guys basically part of the firm, because it's really a team effort on getting this done. And I couldn't get our attorneys paid if it was just me, and I'm using a spreadsheet, which I don't know how to use, and I don't have the functionality that LeanLaw provides. And certainly if I don't have Karyn getting everything right in QuickBooks and saying, okay, here's what everybody's being paid, and it, being able to do the reporting, it wouldn't be able to do that. So that is, I think, one of the fundamental things that every firm has to have in place is, how are you going to get your lawyers paid? How are you going to do that? And make it transparent, make it simple. But then
So I'm
the
going to paraphrase
functionality of
that. I'm going to paraphrase that because we're running out of time. What I heard you say is, define the comp scheme up front, be transparent with it as you're recruiting your team. Number two, pick a tool that works with your comp tracking system. LeanLaw is really good at comp tracking. I'm one of the founders. I'm biased, but we're really awesome. And that was a key decision as you were forming this new firm, the right partnership. And most importantly, have a strong back office, whether that's inside your firm or outside your firm, that understands how comp tracking works and can facilitate the mechanics of that. Karyn, we're at the end. Do you have anything to add to that in terms of questions you want answered?
No, not really.
Cool.
I mean,
So I want to.
I start with just real fast. I start with the basis of what vision do they have in their mind. Try to understand what their vision, and then, you kind of go from there.
Well, first I want to thank the two of you. We're at the hour. This was a wonderful conversation. It flew by, right, from the time. So I thank you both for the conversation, and I thank you for the collaboration, but I also, most importantly, thank you for the partnership that I've had with the two of you over the last, multiple years. We've been in the trenches a few times, and it really is a trusted partnership, because I will tell everyone from a software perspective, no software is perfect, but if you can have relationships, it will work over the long term. To this audience, thank you so much for participating and your questions. We do have we're a business. We're not doing this just to educate the world. You will get a phone call from Amy from our company following up, because we'd love to either answer questions about compensation tracking if you're a current LeanLaw customer, or more, just as importantly, we'd love to help you understand our capabilities and what we do and encourage that interaction. And my information is always available. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm highly, I can be found very easily in the world with that. So again, Karyn, and so, the last thing I want to summarize. So what we heard today, just for the group, last point: one, Be clear about your comp stream and what it is. Make it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Be open to change. Do not be resistant to it. The world is ever changing. And if you make it simple and transparent, life will be easier. Pick a good software tool to automate it. Don't do it manually. Even if there's a bit at the end that you need to do manually, the lion's share of it should be flexible and work within your architecture. And with that, I say thank you again to Suzy and Karyn. And when ready, we'll end the webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I guess I'm going to leave.